So, Tim, Nat, we'll go with Nat, right?
Yeah,
Is that all
that
right?
works.
All right, cool. So thanks so much for coming on and talking to me. You guys have been in a little bit of a spotlight since the Sega 60th anniversary. Tim, especially with your long Twitter thread about not just that they put it out there, but the way that they described it. A little janky and a little buggy and stuff like that. Um, and we'll get to that in a minute. But kind of, what do you guys? How did you guys feel when? I mean, like, I guess, how did you guys feel the second you found out that it was going to be not only distributed to the public, but for free, and like without even knowing that they were going to say something like that it was buggy or janky, like just them saying that they were going to put it in their pack.
I mean, it was. I think the thing was, it was just kind of confusing. It's kind of like you don't really expect it's because this was a prototype that we'd done 8 years ago, and been put to bed, was done. Someone had leaked a video on YouTube, so it's like it was known about, but like it's this old thing that we worked on, and like I've worked on a bunch of cancelled games and things like that, and it just happens, right? And then to appear 8 years later was just kind of surreal. I don't know if you've got a what your take on this?
I think the immediate words that left my mouth were just, what the, like, I don't know if we're swearing here, but definitely a big WTF was let out. And confusion about, first of all, why, and then how. And, then there was the follow-up where I started to read about, like, them saying they'd reached out to the team and stuff. And I was like, well, I'm not really sure who they're talking about here, because I think I know most of these people. I'm still working with like a whole bunch of them, and the other ones that I'm not working with are friends or close friends, and it was just a total cluster of just confusion. I was kind of excited about it in some ways, though. Like,
well, sure, yeah.
It's so rare that something you work on and you put a lot of effort into that then gets shelved ever actually gets to come back out. These big companies are holding years and years of people's efforts behind the scenes, I'm sure. Every major company is holding these things, so I don't know. I never had a problem with it coming out. I just the way that it happened then was a different story, I guess.
Yeah, like I've had for a while my bio used to mention all my best work is in cancelled projects, and the idea of them kind of re-emerging in some way is actually exciting because you can point at it, you can put it in a reel, you can say I did that bit. That's fine. In fact, I think if Sega had said, hey, we just looked through our servers and we have no idea where this build came from, but check it out, lol, I would have been less insulted than the way they'd actually done it. Like, because at least you'd be like, well, half-assed to the end and kind of fair point. But yeah, it was the pitched as we reached out to the original team to dust off this gem, and yeah.
And so, as far as you guys know, they didn't reach out to anyone.
I think we worked out in the end that they were using a company to do the update, because it's not actually quite the same as the original. I don't know if you noticed any of the details about that, but there's it's been updated to a newer version of Unity, and they slapped like a new Sega logo at the start. They didn't bother to put any credits in or anything, so the extent of the effort was pretty shallow. But my understanding is they did actually use a company here in Australia where some of the workers worked at Sega back in the day. But I don't know if any of the people who worked there actually had any hand in the thing other than being like leads and managers who I guess would have signed off on stuff. So I'm not too sure.
So you guys definitely weren't asked about it at all. And based on Tim's thread, it sounded like it was not a fun process creating that prototype. Not from the moment they brought it to you bringing it to the board or just whoever was going to greenlight it. It just sounded like it was a bad process the whole way through.
Can I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd actually like to take this question because I think Tim's outlined his experience of the thing in his Twitter thread, but like there's some nuance to it that may get lost in the process of what happened, because we'd actually been working at Sega. We were crunching away on the Olympics. Yes, you crunch for even really bad games sometimes. I crunched much harder on the previous game we made at Sega before that called Stormrise, where at one point me and some other designers stayed in the studio for like 72 hours straight to try and reach a beta milestone, and that game's got like a 40 on Metacritic.
I played it.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry,
have
but
played
also happy. There's some cool stuff in that game, but it was terrible. That's how I look at it.
Yes.
Anyway, we were at the time working incredibly hard on the Olympics at one point. And while that was going on, we were pretty certain that like Sega was going to get shut down because we had no next project. And, you know, at some point you kind of get Stockholm syndrome and really start to love the place you work for, even if a lot of what's happening there is very unhealthy. And so we started making prototypes in our spare time, which I think Tim touched on in his thread, where we'd made one for some internal stuff that we can't talk about. And then the Castle of Illusion remake that the studio ended up getting a pitch for, we had made a prototype for that in our spare time after like working really late at Sega. Then going home, Tim would work on that prototype and I would work on the design for it. And another guy named Cade was helping with like some of the design and some of the art. And then that had turned into a project, and they were so happy with what like essentially we had done there that for Golden Axe, they asked us to replicate how we worked on that, but to make the Golden Axe prototype. And that was actually super exciting because yeah, some of the things like the way it worked out was not the best, but the concept was meant to be do it how you guys want to do it like in your own way, but with the resources of not having to do it on your own time, like do it at the office with support of the art team, with support of like the rest of the things. And obviously that's not how it turned out. So like right. I'll let Tim get into the specifics of that, but the framing of it is actually really different to how the negatives of what his Twitter thread pointed out. It was meant to be like a triumph in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I think that's actually something that I noticed when I started getting replies and it started spreading a bit further than I was expecting, is that a lot of people saw it as a story of workplace abuse, like, you know, evil bosses had come in and made me do something terrible. But it was actually like, it definitely felt like triumphant, like we were fighting an unwinnable war and winning it. Like it was amazing. We were like, yeah, we were punching God in the dick. It was
perfect.
Like when they came to us and pitched this prototype, I remember feeling amused, right? Like this producer came in and said, "We want you to make this prototype. We've got 2 weeks to do it." And it's like you're thinking, okay, like prototype boxes sliding around. No, it has to be polished visually. It has to impress people. It has to look like a finished game. And we've got this really hard deadline. Can you do it? And we're thinking like no. But I'm willing to give it a shot, right? Because why not? It's Golden Axe. Why not? We felt invincible. We'd done this really good stuff in the past. And then the funny thing was we actually succeeded even in spite of all the stuff that went on. Like that story about like being the personal nexus of all this, like, you know, long hours, inept management and, you know, unreasonable demands. We pulled it off in the face of that. And it felt like a huge thing. And then of course, you know, in hindsight, it felt like, yeah, we got a bit stiffed by the management of that studio and the way things went down. But like the actual creation of that prototype, I still feel proud about. Like we did. I don't think it's a good idea to do work that way. I was not lying when I talked about the RSI in my arm. I ended up having like treatments of physio and like they had the dry needling where they're trying to get the knots out of the arm and all this kind of stuff. So that was fun. And I'm pretty sure that all stemmed from that particular little short stint. But yeah.
I think like the process of making that prototype too was actually the genesis of what instilled in us the desire to leave the company and start it. Well, what ended up being starting our own thing, although we weren't sure we were going to be able to do that for a while. Like we thought we were all going to just separate to the winds. You know, I was interviewing in Finland over at Remedy, and Tim took a job at another studio in Brisbane before we eventually all quit what we were doing and decided to form Witchbane. But initially, like the premise of that prototype was like, as Tim said, it was so exciting. It was like we were thrilled to get the chance to make a Golden Axe prototype. We wanted to kill it. And then when the producer was like, you'll get to do it with some level of autonomy your own way, where you won't be beholden to like what had become fairly obviously somewhat dysfunctional inside the studio. The process by which things were working on other stuff was like just not very good. But it took less than like a day for that to start crumbling, and I'd say about 3 days before it fell apart completely. Like, you know, what was it, 5 days in when they called a meeting to say that this does it, that it's never going to be able to hit the milestone that they wanted. And you didn't change a thing about what the plan was at that point. That was the one where he said, he was laying in his bed, and I remember the next day he was like, we're just going to do what we were always planning to do. And it worked out. It hit exactly to like the quality level or higher even than we were ever hoping that it would in the ridiculous time frame. But yeah, within a day, it changed from you'll get to do this the way that you want to do it. You'll get to have some autonomy and plan and figure out how you're going to make this, to no, it needs to have attack animations on screen tomorrow, or you're I don't even know what they were threatening at the time, because like we were the ones making it. So I'm not sure what like was going to be the follow up whenever we didn't do what they said, because there was no alternatives, no one else who was going to make it. And then they took me off the project like intermittently after about 2 days, where they were like, oh yeah, we're going to make it green light so you and Tim can work together for the whole 2 weeks. And then 2 days later, it's like, no, we need you to work on this other ridiculous thing that's going to take like 7 hours out of your day every day, and just like, leave Tim in the lurch. It was a very strange experience.
Yeah, that's a bit I remember early on. Like, it was like, okay, me and Nat, it's like I'm gonna be doing the programming, I'm gonna be doing the all the kind of the coding. But the way we'd worked on the previous prototypes is like, I need, Nat is my design rudder. He's guiding this whole thing. He's my voice of reason when I'm in the zone trying to like throw all these enemy stuff together. And yeah, like I think after about 2 days, it's like, where's Nat? He's been assigned to other tasks. It's like, you told me to do this impossible task, and then you took Nat off,
left you with even less
else.
resources than you did when it was already an impossible task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, so how long was the original? Was it 2 weeks? They said you had 2 weeks to do this, right?
So we were given 2 weeks. I remember it being like a little bit longer than that.
There was a few days of tasks at the end. Yeah. There was definitely a few days. It was less than 3 weeks total. I know that for certain. It was 2 weeks to hit what needed to be, like, because in games you often have release candidate. When you're actually releasing a game, you'll have like alpha, beta, then release candidate, which is like the day 0 version, and then you keep working on it for the day 1 patch edition. So after 2 weeks, it needed to be in a state that they could actually like give it to someone if that was the version they had to use. But then it turned out we had like 3 or 4 extra days to polish essentially visual elements and animations and things, because they were literally flying to, I'm pretty sure it was E3. I can't actually remember what conference it was, because I can't remember exactly, like this is so long ago now.
I'm almost certain it was E3.
Yeah, they were going to have a meeting behind closed doors with the executives at Sega Europe and Sega Japan, because this was all headed up by like the son of the head of Sega Japan was heading up this whole digital initiative.
Oh, interesting.
And like they were going to pitch it to the executives there out of like kind of the blue, where they've been talking to them, but I don't think Sega had any idea that we were presenting something so finished. So yeah, we had like 2 weeks to make it, and then essentially a few extra days of, oh, these are extra days that came out of nowhere, polish it up.
And I think given the amount of time, it's surprising just because of how, I mean, I played it. It's very functional. I mean, considering, again, less than 3 weeks, it's very good. And I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of people, especially in the Twitter thread, were, it seemed like there was a lot of back and forth over whether or not it was, I don't know, good, I guess, for lack of a better word. And a lot of people saying things like, are you kidding me? For less than 3 weeks, this is amazing. This is insane. Like, I can't believe they were able to pull this off. There also seems to be a little bit mix between how you guys are talking. So you definitely don't think that doing this sort of thing is a good idea, but it seems like it's the main reason why you guys left and started your own company, right? What do you think is more common? Do you think it's more common that people are getting burnt out on crunch and leaving and starting their own companies like you guys did, or are people just kind of staying in that not so good cycle that seems to be repeating itself over and over again?
I mean, I think it's more likely that people get burned out and either leave the industry or stay burned out. I don't think it's a. I think for every person that experiences a really bad thing and goes and starts their own company, there's a lot more that just leave games forever or kind of enter a permanent low energy state. So it's a.
Yeah, I'd say from anecdotal experience, and if I was to look at the statistics of the best, let's just say the best games programmers that I've ever known in my life or ever met, either through like personal friendships or working with them, maybe 50+% just decided to do something else because it was not worth it to keep doing it in games for them. And like the attrition rate of extremely talented people who are super passionate is absurdly high when you think about how much passion there actually is. If you look at any other industry that's like somewhat passion driven or has a passion element, I don't think that their attrition rates are quite as high as it is in games. Like these are people who would rather be doing games even if they got paid less and worked longer hours, so long as it was like not completely horrible, and yet they still leave in droves, and it's ridiculous. Or if they don't leave, they burn out for years. One of my best mates ended up taking off like 3 or 4 years out of the games industry entirely before coming back to like a lead role at a major AAA studio straight away, because like he's that good. But he just had to leave. He couldn't do it anymore. He like was just like, I can't do it. I need to sit on like, an island doing remote work on random data entry related things for a couple of years just to like not hate what's going on anymore. So there's definitely, it can become extremely toxic, and it's frustrating that like a lot of these companies, I don't think, respect these talented people as much as they should, because they foresee that they can just churn in new people, and that happens with games a lot. Tim worked at Team Bondi, which was notorious for like they would actively work on the strategy. From my understanding, I wasn't there, but from what I've been told, a lot of people was they would be like, all right, we're going to grind down these kids straight out of university until they leave the games industry entirely, and then we hire the next batch that just graduated.
Because everybody wants to work in games.
Yeah, and that was
so there's never a
shortage.
Strategy.
Yeah. I was actually about to mention Team Bondi. That was a good example. Yeah, I know the art team in particular. When I was there, now, so to clarify that, as far as I know, LA Noire was in development for around 8 years or something like that, and I was there for a bit over a year in the middle of that. So like, I'm a core sample in the middle of this development. I wasn't there when it shipped, and I wasn't there when it started. But during my time there, the art team skewed very young. They had a lot of they would get them from a local games course that was there, and so they'd have influxes. There's all these people would join, and like most of them wouldn't make it through their probation kind of thing, and so they're basically just like pulling them in, chucking them back. And meanwhile, we had some of us were tracking, like during the time I was there, over a 12-month period, we had 24 people resign. That's separate to being like fired and let go and not passing probation. This is people that just decided to stop working there. And there was this ongoing joke among the programmers that basically whenever they got fed up, they'll go, I'm going to go work for a bank and make twice as much money. Because like it was Sydney, there was like a lot of financial, there was Google, that kind of stuff. And this would happen. People would just leave, and next time you'd see them, they'd be in a suit. They'd look a bit miserable because they weren't in cool games anymore. But and it sucks. Yeah, I was watching this company like chew people up and spit them out.
Yeah. Like the lead gameplay programmer at Sega, who was a good friend of ours, he now is like a very high level leader at Google or something, because like the games industry was just so absurd. He was arguably the best lead or like managerial programmer I've ever worked with, and I think that he could have led the best teams in the world, but he just went on to do something else because there was more opportunity, there was better work-life balance. There's just so many positives to not working in the games industry in some of these instances.
So he's got a managerial role at Google, and it has a
Yeah.
much better work-life balance than he does in the games industry.
Oh, much,
I mean, like
much.
that's just a recreational industry.
I
you
mean,
know,
I can't ask him, but I'm sure that he earns 3 times as much or more. Like that would not be outside the realm of normal for that kind of shift from games to something else.
Absolutely. Wow. So, I guess my next question would be about how you guys feel about. I guess there seems to be it almost seems like crunch is in the games industry is split in 2 camps from the outside, and I feel like there's one camp that's dismissing it and normalizing it. I don't know if you guys know who Colin Moriarty is. But he's gone so far as to say that being upset about crunch is breathless calamity seeking, whatever that means. But it seems like they really kind of go out of their way, and you see this quite a lot with something like CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk. They're really downplaying just how bad it is. You guys are talking about crunch burning people out to the point where they're just straight up leaving the industry as a whole, right? Like not even looking for jobs in other studios, right? Just like, well, I'm gone, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. And these people are like, no, it's not that big of a deal. Every industry goes through crunch. Every industry has crunch. Have you guys seen this? And one thing that I found hilarious was Nat, you tweeted out about this. I don't know if it was a Steam review or Steam forum post where it was titled, "Kind of disgusted to see an employee claim ownership and bad mouthing their employer," which I was just blown away by. I could not believe. Obviously, hoping troll, but
Yeah, I hope they weren't serious as well.
yeah. But still, I see a lot of this dismissal and normalization and downplaying of crunch. Do you guys notice that? Do you guys see that?
Yeah, it's honestly inside like the industry, it's very polarized, and I find it frustrating actually. I feel like we don't have the right conversations about crunch because people come from this point of like it's bad and we need to stop it, and it's like no, it's good, it gets games done, and it's kind of like no, we need to tease apart what we're even talking about, because when somebody says crunch is bad, it's burning people out, and they're leaving the industry, the person that supports crunch says no, that's just like filtering out the weak people and leaving in the best people versus breaking people, right? Like and it's complicated because it's not actually complicated. Crunch is bad, but it's complicated to think about because of all the times that I've personally crunched, I've never done it because a higher up basically threatened my job or told me that like I had to kind of thing. It was generally because I wanted to support my team. I wanted to show solidarity with the guy next to me who was just, working around the clock. It was because I was so scared that the project was going to go down that I thought that like working lots of hours is the one thing I could do. It's kind of like an anxiety, type thing. Not touched on it earlier, but like you actually like I feel like there's probably more crunch on bad games than there are on good games because there's that desperate feeling to like push it back into contention to get it there. And I've always done it for my team and for my project. I've never had like loyalty to the higher ups kind of thing, like screw those people. But like the team loyalty is no joke. And it's like, so when you're doing it because of that, it feels like you're doing something heroic. It feels like you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, we made the Castle Illusion prototype in our bedrooms. No one asked us to make it. No one forced us to make it. We were just like, well, we wanted the team to keep going. We loved a lot of the people we were working with. We really, I mean, obviously you value your job as well. You need a paycheck to live. Let's not devalue that aspect of crunch where there's an external factor of even if somebody's asking you to, you don't want to end up, without a job. Nobody does.
Absolutely.
But a lot of it is camaraderie. It's that sense of like, and companies get really good at this. I've come to realize now after having not worked at a company for many years that companies get really, really good at building you up as a team / mini family that you often spend more time with these individuals than your actual families. My design buddy Dan Lettinen, who it's like one of the lead designers on Med 2 Kingdoms, great guy. He would call me his work wife because we would spend so much more time. He'd be like, I spend more time with you than my actual wife. And that was true for like 3 years. So you do end up in the situation where that's one of the main drivers that you want to do it. And my view on crunch is pretty simple. Colin Moriarty's statements are not good, is how I would describe that.
That's very
they
polite.
usually come. I would say that a lot of statements like that come from a place where people are lacking empathy. If you point me to a steel worker tomorrow who's working double shifts at like 18-hour days or something, and then you go, well, they're crunching. Why don't they complain? I'll be like, well, they probably should complain about it if they're doing that. And if they're doing that ongoing for 6 to 9 months, which often happens in games, then we should be having some empathy for that too. Like, I don't think saying this thing is bad, so why you shouldn't be able to complain about this bad thing. Like, no, they're both bad. Like, all of these cases of ridiculous overwork and burnout are bad. You don't like make one less bad because there's another bad thing or even a worse thing.
Absolutely.
And but for crunch, it comes down to me is that crunch is bad, crunch is sometimes necessary, and crunch long term never increases productivity. Those are like the three things that I view them as. So whenever I hear about a game like Cyberpunk where people are crunching, I'd be like, well, I can understand that they're crunching now, and I'm not going to tell them not to crunch because they know that like they want to hit this milestone or whatever. There's a lot of complicated stuff that goes on inside that team, I'm sure, with the managers pushing it or the people wanting to do it. And I'm not privy to any of that information. And I've worked on games where crunch happened, and I look at it and be like, well, I've crunched on things that weren't even for other companies, like for our own stuff. For Cactus, there was definitely periods where we crunched and we weren't beholden to anyone. We just like really wanted to finish things at certain points. But you have to be aware every time you crunch, you're going to pay that somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing where you can't blanket statement say, that there's no case to ever crunch. So much as you can say that in an ideal world, if you're planning your project perfectly and you had perfect everything going on, there should never be crunch because it doesn't improve productivity. But what it can do is solve a bottleneck. That's the only thing it can do. And then when you do that, you have to accept that you failed and try really hard next time to not have that bottleneck. And that's kind of where I come down on crunch.
Right. These repeating cycles of every single project ending up having 6 to 9 months worth of crunch, unacceptable. But
yeah.
seeing it not necessarily unavoidable.
Almost inevitable in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's great answer. Great answer.
Yeah, I ran into an interesting one on Cactus as well when doing our own project. I ran into a point where I realized my productivity was dropping because I was just trying to get so much done that I started having to enforce my own work hours, where it would like hit 6 p.m. and I literally would just stop and leave and go for a big walk around the neighborhood kind of thing. And that wasn't even out of respect for myself, which sounds really bad. It was out of the fact that like I was noticing I was getting less tasks done in a day, and it was just like, this is ridiculous. I've got to get on top of this. And it's just like you can't keep pulling can't keep pulling performance out of a team. It's totally agree with that.
Productiveness has diminishing returns, right? Like you work an extra hour after 8 hours, that's probably fine. But the longer you work, the less you're going to get. Like the human body can really, like your mind and your body can really only take so much, right? So that just makes so much sense. And working from home, I think we're all kind of learning that now. But working from home, you can't just the day kind of blends together. There's no I'm leaving work now. You know what I mean? That my work day is done. You're working from home. I'm at home right now, and when my day ends, I close my laptop screen, and that's about it. You know what I mean? Like I'm in the same place, and it's quiet, and if I left that laptop screen open and drifted into 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, how would I tell, right? So. Great answers, both of you. I'm just glad to hear you guys. Like one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you guys so much was, I have another reason in a minute here, but one of the main ones is that, aside from Tim's thread, just overall seeing lots of misinformation coming out about crunch, especially with CD Projekt Red, and just kind of, I mean, I don't know, it gets a little disheartening just reading, and that's partly my fault, just being on social media so much, but just reading, everybody's opinions and everybody just kind of going on and on about, and I get it, there are a lot of people that really 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 want Cyberpunk to be out, but it's just, I mean, it's a little disheartening seeing people say that, oh, I don't care that somebody else is working an obscene amount of time and never seeing their family, so much to the point that the president of the company is releasing a statement saying, sorry, you guys aren't getting to spend as much time with your family. And it's just disheartening to see, people being okay with that. But let's move on from that. Actually, one last question about Golden Axe. Were you guys Golden Axe fans? Did you guys play it when you were younger? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A huge amounts that my oldest brother he bought us Mega Drive, was the first ever actual console that my family owned. Before that, we couldn't afford anything. And he had a job and he earned a bunch of money, and he bought a Mega Drive when I think it was like several years old at that point too, so it was cheaper, and we got Golden Axe for it and played so much of that game, which is why the inferior Golden Axe games on the Mega Drive are my favorites, just because that's where I spent all my time and I have those fond memories. I actually preferred Golden Axe to Streets of Rage. People can come at me for that one. That's fine, but that was where my experience was, and I think that how you play something matters as much as what you played at that point in your life.
Sure. Did you have Streets of Rage?
Not until much later. No.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
We rented it a few times, and I was like, "This is great," but Golden Axe, that was the original. That was the best, obviously. It's how you are when you're like 10 years old or whatever.
Absolutely. Tim?
Yeah, no, I have very fond memories of, like, we had arcade lock-ins where like occasionally, and like there were overnight ones, and it's like playing through, like my top tier was at that time I think was Final Fight. Like I remember thinking like it was like top of the kind of beat up things, but like Golden Age, like I used to play so many Sega games. Like this was the thing that we kind of really me and Nat bonded over at Sega, was that we had this kind of like reverence, or how do you describe it, like kind of respect or kind of shared history of all these Sega games are really important to us.
It's definitely respect, I think, in that can lead to reverence, and it's the history that. I mean, I don't want to get into like some really negative stuff about some of the leaders and managers I worked for, but I will say that was a major point of contention that would come up several times while I was working there, is that I didn't think that it was ever possible or healthy to work on something or to work at a place where you didn't care about the history that they represented. And a lot of the times our conversations, and why it was so important to us that when they said, you get to do this your way, you'll get to make it in the way that you want, was because when we discuss things like Golden Axe with some of these people, you get into a conversation where someone would just completely downplay the work that would have gone into the original games. So they'd talk about Golden Axe and be like, oh, they just did that because that was quick and easy. That's obviously how you do it. And I'd be like, no, like, can you imagine when you're making the original Golden Axe? Like, these guys would have been putting in just as much thought then as we're putting in now. Just because games were less understood then, that didn't mean it was any easier for them to come up with all of this. Like, they're pushing the freaking envelope. They're pushing the envelope harder with the original Golden Axe than anything any of these people I'm working with have ever pushed the envelope in games of their era, okay? We're making freaking the Olympics 2012 and Stormrise, all right? We're not like pushing the envelope the way that Golden Axe was on the arcades back in the day from the original Sega team. Show some respect for like the level of effort they would have gone into. Try and understand why they made the choices they did. Maybe we'll make different choices, but you'll never know unless you put the time in to think like, this was important to them. They did this on purpose. This might be really good. And maybe it's not good and you make different choices, but you won't know unless you get to that point.
Yeah, like being acutely aware that we're standing on the shoulders of giants was really important with the prototypes we made. In each way, we wanted to leverage what everyone already loved about them and being deeply respectful. Like every decision that deviates Golden Axe from like the prototype from the way Golden Axe plays was at least intentional in the sense of like we knew about it. There was nothing that was like, oh, we just didn't know how the combat worked. The first thing we did was dig into that combo system and actually like understand, like even from stuff you remember playing as a kid and you think, oh yeah, I remember how the combos work, and you go, wait, let's actually like step over it frame by frame. Let's look at what's going on. Let's look at how the health bars are working, that kind of stuff. And it's just like that, to me, that seems like entry level stuff.
Yeah, I remember the very first thing we were doing was frame counting the attack animations on the original Golden Axe, like taking high frame rate captures of that to count down like how many frames before, after you press the button and after the attack animation starts until like the hit connects, and how many frames between attacks you had to like perform next things, to try and figure out like whether a combo system was about being locked into things or whether it was like combo windows, or it was context sensitive based on positioning, and just trying to like understand what it was that they were doing and why it might be different to other fighting games. Because there are differences definitely between the game feel of Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, all of these games. They're beat 'em ups, and yeah, you stand next to an enemy and you press a button repeatedly to do a combo, but the opportunities and slight differences they have are what made them different games at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge differences, I think. In fact, if you had grown, talk to anybody that grew up at that time and played those types of games, I think it would be very easy to get them, to just say, tell me what the differences are, and just have them immediately point to certain things. Golden Axe had magic. Streets of Rage did not have magic, but it still had special moves. I love Final Fight because I had a Super Nintendo. I didn't have a Sega console, but I still played Golden Axe at the arcade. So you guys finally decide that enough is enough, and you guys start interviewing elsewhere. And what was the decision to go together and create Witchbeam Games?
You want to tackle that one, Tim?
Sure. So so we'd had like I had a what was the actual kind of
Genesis. Well, I think we made like a free game at one point when we were still at Sega. That was just like a game jam, because we'd been making these prototypes. I'm sorry to butt in on your story, but I'll cap in. You can jump in towards the middle, I guess. We've been making those prototypes for Sega, and we really started to realize that we were somewhat capable of actually making games that were very interesting on our own, because everybody has an ego and wants to think that they're the best at making games. We're like, yeah, of course we're better than everyone else. Of course the problem is all of our leaders and managers and stuff, but there's no evidence of that in a lot of ways. That's just like, you got to be careful not to believe your own hype, right? So we had been making those prototypes, which was really helpful. And then we had made talked about what it would be like to make our own games together. And we made like a game jam for a game called Antibody Boost, which was just like a very tiny 48-hour test project. But it was like trying to make and release something that was outside of Sega. And I think it gave us, to some degree, that extra boost of confidence that you could actually put something out in the public as your own, and that people wouldn't completely hate it, because a couple hundred people downloaded it and they were like, oh, this is a fun little game jam project. And we combined that with like the ideas that we had for games, and Tim had been working on some other prototypes, like even years earlier. Cactus was a very old project. And we just kind of like had this idea of, if it's not now, it's never. Basically, we're getting older, going to split up to different points in the world. It wasn't getting particularly easier to make your own thing. We're slowly starting to come to the end of easy discoverability, and the indie boom had just happened, but there was already signs that you'll become more difficult, not less difficult over time. So I don't know, we just kind of decided at one point to, why not risk everything and go bankrupt and homeless if everything goes wrong, or maybe make it happen and get to make stuff that we actually care about. And there's no easy way to make that decision.
Yeah, so the timeline was actually kind of interesting now I think about it. Back in, I think, 2008 or 2009 or something, I'd been working at Pandemic Studios, and there'd been rounds of layoffs because they were closing the studio. and my housemate was all excited about this engine called Unity that had previously been Mac only, but now had a Windows build, and was convinced that it should do stuff with that. And so I started dabbling with that. I was an animator primarily, but the cool thing about Unity was I felt confident enough with the scripting language to start doing my own animation coding stuff, which I loved because my big bugbear working at other companies was arguing with the program about exactly how my animation should be blended, because I'm have this get really fixated on how things should work. And so it's like, great, now I don't have to argue with a program. I can just like tinker with the values late into the night myself. The reason, and I started working on this prototype, which funnily enough ended up being Cactus. It was this twin stick shooter that got put on hold multiple times, got shelved when I took on other jobs, but like it was kicking around in the background. And the reason why we were able to make the prototypes at Sega was because I taught myself so much working on this this twin stick prototype. So it's extremely circular. The prototypes and Golden Axe and things like that exist because of Cactus, and then Cactus exists because of Golden Axe.
That's awesome.
So it's this
That's
bizarre kind of The skills I learned working on this prototype that would become Cactus were the only reason why we were able to produce these prototypes at the time.
That's amazing. And a little bit of a synchronicity sort of thing, right? So that's how Cactus came about. What about you guys are working on a game called Unpacking now, correct?
So I am, and Nart's got his own project. We're doing with Witchbeam's got 2 projects cooking at the moment.
That's exciting.
I took some time for various reasons to do some other stuff a couple of years ago, and Tim started up the project Unpacking with his partner Ren. Actually, where before it was even known whether it would be a Witchbeam project, they were tinkering with that as like a game jam thing, and it turned into Unpacking. So I'm not working on that one. I'm just helping with any like paperwork to do with businesses and finances and bank accounts and the back end of running a company stuff. And they're actually making that game entirely, and I'm working on a small separate game that I started recently. So it is still a Witchbeam game, but I took a break, and he's been working on that in the meantime.
Okay, are you now ready to talk about what you're working on, Ned?
It's pretty early these days, but it's a puzzle game. It's slightly less zen than Unpacking, slightly more judgmental, but not especially judgmental. I describe it so far as like a slight cross between Lemmings and Choo Choo Rocket, but nothing really to show for a little while yet.
All right. Well, you keep me posted because that sounds amazing.
I like both games are very chill though. I'm kind of waiting for someone to be like, like look at Unpacking and go like, how did Witchbeam go from the frantic gameplay of Cactus to this? It must be because Nart's off the project, and then they'll be like, here's Nart's project, and it's also chill, and they'll be like, okay, now I'm just confused. But
yeah. Oh, you guys just have an overabundance of chill that you wanted to get out.
Yeah.
So Unpacking looks phenomenal. I just want to say, and I agree, it looks very zen. Where did you get the idea for that?
So it's funny because it was when I was moving in with my partner, and we were moving, and had all my stuff in boxes, and I didn't label anything because I'm me, and so we had this big pile of boxes in the living room, and as you're unpacking stuff, it was actually pretty agreeable. It's funny, we get a lot of people saying like, oh, why would you make a game about unpacking? I hate unpacking. It's like, packing sucks, but unpacking is actually not so bad. Like, especially we're moving into this place, we're pulling stuff out of boxes, deciding where it meant to go. And so we had the thing that was like, this feels a bit like a game. And so me and Ren kept talking about as a game, and I'm a bit insufferable, and I talk about game design all the time. And so I kind of kept coming back to this and pushing Ren to like invent features or how would this work, until it kind of became this more of a serious idea. And then we had there's this games accelerator called Stugan that runs in Sweden, where they've done it for a few years. They've kind of put it on hold for now, but teams from around the world pitch their games, and if they're accepted, you go out to Sweden, and they drive you out to a cabin in the woods for a couple of months, where you work on a game for like game in the woods, surrounded by nature with other game developers. And we'd seen this happening before, and we were both at a point where we could apply to it. So we decided to throw together a prototype, and it got accepted. And we went over to Sweden, and that's where we worked on the game. By the time we got back with the game, we were starting to get a bit of attention, and we were like, "Hey, should this be a Witchbeam project?" And that's when we hit up Jeff, the other co-founder of Witchbeam, was like, "What if we do this under the Witchbeam banner, kind of thing?" And then that's how that happened. So,
well, wait, okay,
really,
so hang on. Well, let's back it up. Let's back it up because you just threw a lot at me. What is this thing called in Sweden?
Stugan. So it's like it's the Swedish name for like cabin, kind of, or kind of, yeah.
What was that like? Like,
It's absolutely amazing. We got there right around midsummer, and so like it was bright out until like 11 o'clock. Like, because like, where's the sun gonna go away? It was a ski lodge during the summer, so it was all super green, and there was this big lake, and that was the reason why the cabins were presumably like, we could kind of book out the place, or they could book out the place for us. And so basically we stayed in these little ski cabins in the summer, and then collected in the big place. They fed us, so like they had catering, and like there was a staff cooking and stuff for us, and we basically just worked for a couple of months and played a lot of volleyball, went swimming a lot of the days. It was really surreal and amazing. Kind of feels really odd looking back on it. And there was about 20 other people, 20 other developers across like 15 teams. And we've been keeping in touch with most of them we've got a Discord now. And so it's been
awesome.
It's really, really cool.
Didn't you say that the game Teardown that was made by someone related to that as well, right?
So they had a lot of mentors coming, and it was just really good. They had a lot of people kind of come by and talk to us, and give us talks and hang out for us for a bit. I forget his name, but he recently released Teardown, the voxel game where you destroy stuff, and he's been doing amazing stuff. He came and gave an amazing presentation about his cool tech, which would then turn into Teardown, and that was extremely inspiring. It was like genuine genius levels where he's just explaining, it's like, I made this game for iOS about pushing water around, and it's like we just calculate all the voxels and do this. And it's like, I just wrote my own engine because it's easier. I'm like, so that was super cool. Like, I love that they managed to kind of get this influx of really interesting people to.
That's amazing. That is, I mean, like that's wild to me. I can't even imagine. I mean, like what an awesome opportunity, and so cool that you got to go do that, and and it spawned on, and now we're gonna get unpacking, and that comes out next year, right? Early next year.
I don't know about early. We're still definitely next year. We're still figuring out. Yep.
I'm very excited for unpacking. I'm unfortunately part of the camp that hates. Well, I hate moving. I should say moving. I think is terrible. But unpacking, it's almost like starting over in a way, right? So let's scale way back. Where are you guys at right now? Where do you guys live right now?
So Brisbane. So me and I used to be roomies, but
now Tim's living in Brisbane and I'm living on the Gold Coast, which is just like a couple or an hour and a half south of where he lives, working remotely on things, which isn't too bad now that we're working on separate projects as well. But it's still close enough, and it's the same time zone, which makes it relatively easy if we do need to collaborate on anything at any point in time, which is pretty good. And still trying to work with other people in Australia, which is its own microcosm of trying to build up an industry that completely fell apart and fractured around 2010 to 2012.
Yeah. Well, so have you guys? Obviously, have you both always lived in Australia and just in the same area, or are you guys from the same area, or?
So I'm from Adelaide, which is down South Australia, and
Okay.
I moved Adelaide to Sydney to work on LA Noir, and then up to Brisbane to work on a pandemic project. and I kind of just stuck around here. So that's been my career / moving trajectory. No.
I've lived within a 3-hour drive of this area my entire life, but at various places. So I used to live down south of here, just south of the border into New South Wales, in a place called Lismore, which is like it's a country city. So it's not quite a town. It's technically a city, but it is more rural. You know, there'd be farms on the outskirts, and I'd spend a lot of time out there. And now, living in the metropolis areas of Gold Coast and Brisbane City, the Big Smoke, as they would have called it from there. But basically, anywhere between Lismore and the Sunshine Coast here, I've lived around this whole area my entire life.
And what made you guys want to work in games?
Oh, that's interesting. Mine's
I
a
just
weird.
mean, like, a lot of people, this is an enormous industry, right? I mean, there, millions and millions and millions of people play games, but not, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that want to make games that never really hit that threshold, right? But generally, there's a reason, something sparked in you, right, that made you want to, like, this is my career choice.
Yeah. You want to go first, Tim?
Sure. I think I know when that's good. So I was one of those insufferable children who just kind of assumed, like, I remember from early on thinking, like, well, someone's making the games. Why can't I be someone? And like, I was always kind of beelining towards that, like, very, very stubbornly. Like, there was a games company in Adelaide, called Ratbag, that had made, Power Slide was their big one, but then made a few other games. And so it's like, there's a games company in my city. I'll just have to figure out how to make them employ me. And I kept chipping away at it until they hired me as a junior cinematics artist to work on the cutscenes in Dukes of Hazzard: Return of the General Lee for PS4 and Xbox.
Awesome.
And and it's just like, it was so from a fairly young age, I was learning basic programming. Like, I'm an animator and an artist by kind of profession, but I'd always had a little bit of programming background. And when I learned a little bit of programming, I used it to make a text adventure or a point and click adventure when I got a little bit better. And so it's like, I was always just kind of, it was almost like an assumption that was like, something's gonna give, and someone's gonna let me in games, and I'll figure it out. If there was indie development at the time, I probably would have been drawn to that. I actually don't know. I really appreciate going into into companies first, but yeah, that was kind of my path. I was just like stubborn, I guess.
That was a really interesting time, actually, when you entered the industry, that Dukes of Hazzard era, because that was, like, I would say after PlayStation 1 came out, the indie possibility was kind of dead for a long time. It was only like working at large companies that could get contracts to release, like, press discs and release at retail and do all this stuff. But then prior to that, in Australia, we actually had guys like John Passfield and them who were at the forefront of indie. What's the name of the game that he made, the flamethrower game?
Halloween Harry?
Halloween Harry.
Yeah,
for the PC, which is a very old
shareware.
Game, back in the shareware days. But like, that was a thing, right? You had like the indie space, and you could just make a game and put it out there for people and ask them to pay you money if they liked it, which I'm still for that whole thing, by the way, where we ask people to pay money and they get a game. I'm very, very much not for this whole thing where we give people a game and then trick them into giving us money for random things later on. But anyway, that was a thing. And then, like, the consoles became big, and the PS1 era kind of happened, and people moved away from PC to some degree, and there was just like no indie scene, no possibility for doing anything except working for large companies for like 15, 20 years. And then shifted around again to the early days of digital distribution with Steam and other people on PC going, hey, you can actually make your own games again. And consoles started to open up, and you could like put your game out on PlayStations again and Xboxes. And I think it's super cool that now there's actually the two split paths. You can choose to go work for EA and learn the ropes of extreme specialization, which I honestly believe that there's a weird divide where some people in the indie space do not have an appreciation for how much effort goes on to that level of extreme specialization that happens when you work for a big company, and then vice versa. The guys at the big companies don't appreciate that some person on an indie team is doing everything themselves, which is equally absurd. But I like that there's both opportunities now. Sorry, that was a total tangent, but Tim reminded me of that when he said like that was the only way into games at the time when Tim wanted to be in games.
Yeah, but you're right. Now is probably one of, you know, I mean, if gosh, can you even imagine being like 11 or 12 right now? You know,
Yeah.
having all of these free tools at your disposal, and you know, also having all that free time. But like, I mean, I'd be putting out you know, like Tim said, point and click adventures, you know, like crazy because you know, even as a kid, I definitely didn't have the tools at all to, you know, I mean, like you know, if you had asked me at like that age, you know, how people make games, just never would have. I mean, like, I don't even think at that time I was considering that people actually made games. I thought that there was just some monolithic company that just was like, ah, yes, well, let's crank out another Final Fantasy, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, I think I had a similar thing when I was a kid. So my path into games was a long and weird one that I'm not even sure how it ended up happening in the end. But you know, I was very young and we were very poor. We couldn't make our own things. And my first experience with making games was with physical stuff, where my brother would make figurines out of plasticine and Fimo and toothpicks and rubber bands instead of buying action figures and whatever. And he would explain like Dungeons and Dragons. He was a lot older than me. He was like 12 years older than me. So he would explain that he had played this game called Dungeons and Dragons. And even though he didn't own Dungeons and Dragons, so he couldn't take it back and like play the actual game with me, he explained this concept of like, well, what if you just invented your own worlds and invented your own stats and your own characters? And it's like writing a book, but instead of a story you tell someone, it's like ongoing and interactive and you can play together. And that like blew my freaking mind as a kid because, you know, as a poor kid, you invent a lot of your own entertainment to begin with. And now we could invent anything. It was possible. My neighbors had consoles, so I did still play a lot of video games. Jesse had a Nintendo Entertainment System and a PC, and we would play the hell out of Mario and everything else that his divorced parents would buy him to restore his love. You know, the typical, it was the cliche, it really was at the time, where he could like what kind of kid has a NES and a PC in that era of like freaking late 80s? What is this? In Australia, which is way behind the US at the time anyway. So that was cool that I got to see and play these things, even if I couldn't have them myself. But I also assumed that you couldn't make these things, that like geniuses in some room somewhere on the other side of the planet would make these things. And this was doubly true, I think, in outside of Japan at that era, right, where people weren't making a lot of these things, and out in Australia in particular, where nobody was making anything. So it just seemed alien to me. And I went on for the rest of my life assuming that I would never be able to make games, even though I loved messing around with QBasic or Basic in like Commodore 64 and making stuff and inventing my own worlds with Dungeons and Dragons and my own games. And then like 20 years later, in my early 20s, I was playing competitive games a lot. I was very good at Warcraft 3 and then World in Conflict strategy games. And it turned out that a local company based out of Brisbane in Australia wanted people who were really good at those games to come and do some playtests because they were working on a new RTS that they were trying to do, aka Stormrise. I would find out later. And I ended up going in there and having like this ridiculously long chat with the creative director and talking about like, because I had always been very passionate about game design, even though I thought there was never an opportunity to work in that area. And he basically just encouraged me to get a job any which way I could at the studio there, because like, you know, the way that we were talking about games, he was like, it was meant to be 20 minutes of me playing it and then just telling them what I thought, and it turned out to be like 3.5 hours. And that turned into me taking a job in QA, and then I was out of QA inside like 3 months. Wow. Working on other things, and I was there for 5 years making games at Sega, and that was kind of my weird, extremely delayed path to doing something that I'd always wanted to do, but assumed that would not be available to me as an opportunity.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. you get to do what you wanted to do, and there are millions of people out there that will never get that.
Exactly.
And that's amazing.
Part of that story though is you have to try, because like I had assumed there was no point in trying.
Yeah. Remember that out there. What are you guys playing now?
I'm just playing Hades over and over again.
Awesome.
The whole design of that game is extremely addictive.
It looks pretty good. I'm playing, funnily enough, still playing Warcraft 3 because it came out and I got addicted to it all over again.
I played the crap out of Warcraft 3 when that came out.
Yeah.
And the multiplayer was the first time I ever really played like a multiplayer. That was the first time I think I ever played a multiplayer game with matchmaking. Now I think about it. And that was wild at the time.
I had played some StarCraft before that, but basically Warcraft was where I went all in, and it was
same.
It was insane. Actually, did StarCraft even have matchmaking? No, I think it was just custom games.
Yeah, it was.
It was Warcraft. Ladder, right? Like you had the ladder in Warcraft 3. You are absolutely right. That was the first one I also played that had matchmaking. You could click a button, and it would try and find somebody who was as good as you, and you would play them. And more often than not, they were way better than you, and it didn't matter because you'd click the button again, and you get that anxiety while the little eye twitched back and forward.
Remember the eye.
Oh, please give me something. Give me someone I could beat. Give me someone I could beat. And then it would load, and you'd feel your heart sink when it was someone you'd lost to 5 times, and you'd go,
"Oh my gosh,
screw you!"
And then I would always try and convince myself. I was like, "Oh, I know what this guy's gonna do. I know what this guy's gonna do because he beat me 3 times earlier today. I know what he's gonna do," and then he just beat me again. Even feeling like I knew his strategy, he was just gonna beat me again. The StarCraft 2, and I also played a lot of Command and Conquer Online. That was back in the 90s though. And that was the same way though. Same as StarCraft. You just had lobbies.
Yeah.
So all right. So let's wrap this up here. Is there anyone that helped on Golden Axe that you guys want to specifically talk about, or and plug any friends doing anything that we're working on?
I got a couple. I got a couple before Tim gives the shout out. So I am eternally thankful. Now that it's out in the public, I am eternally thankful for Darius, who was our producer. Darius, I'm never going to be able to pronounce his last name. Sadigian, I think, is how you'd say it. I haven't said it in so long now. Who gave us the opportunity to work on it in the first place, even though it didn't end up being the way that we wanted to do it. I am so happy that we even got a chance, because I would love to have another chance to work on a Sega IP, and that was magic. So him and the guys like Koji Hashimoto, who was someone there who had immense reverence for the classic and came through with some of the best elements of the game. Things like the little Go logo and the initial big Golden Axe logo. He made those at the last minute to jam them in, because he was like, it needs to feel like Golden Axe, and he's a guy who killed it. James Fernwanan, who did the majority of the animations. There's a lot of people involved here, and he's still in the games industry in Brisbane, working at I think he works at Game Loft now. The whole crew over now who are at Five Lives, who just released Windbound, who was the art director and the environment artists, and Simon Du, who I think still works at Sega in Europe, just released the Choo Choo Rocket game for Apple Arcade. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people I'm missing. I actually put up a spreadsheet at one point and got people to help out to remember various credits. But yeah, just everyone who worked on it, even though it was not the way that it should have been done, I am immensely thankful for the effort that they all put in.
I've got before you jump in, Tim, I've got the spreadsheet, and I'll make sure to link it when we post this.
Cool.
Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say so the way we worked on it was really interesting, because I was just flat out building the gameplay, and the art team, the environment art team, were also flat out building the environment, because we both knew that this was this 2-week period was going to take all the time. And so I was really happy with the way the environment team worked. Like they were basically just slotting things in, and like the environment's building, and like we were very independent, but we were just like they would check things in, I would pull that down and check my stuff against it. So I was like really impressed with the professionalism of them kind of just pumping this stuff out like parallel to mine. But the people I really enjoyed working with directly was the animators. That was James, and also we had a little bit of time from Adam Daly was also animating. He's funnily enough down in Adelaide now.
Oh, your camera just died, by the way.
Is it come back? Is it? Let's try. There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, is it being weird? No, it is being weird.
What did you pick the wrong camera?
Yeah, probably.
That's okay. We can still see your face. We'll just see up your nose a little bit.
Let me just give it a second.
Hey, there we go.
Yay. Okay. Yeah. So James and Adam, James did like I think the bulk of the animation. Adam did a bit of it. Adam's down in Adelaide working on Conan Chop Chop with which is a funny coincidence. It would all come around eventually. Yeah, they did amazing stuff in a short amount of time, and we did so much. I remember we were like acting out combos, we were pulling up sprite sheets, we were figuring out how we're going to do this stuff. Like replaying the prototype reminded me of how much work we put into actually not directly replicating the animation and the combos, because we had to adapt everything, but we tried to keep everything as close and on model as we could to kind of evoke the nostalgia of Golden Axe. And I was really proud of how those two worked, because I'm an animator, but I didn't have any time to animate. So instead I was kind of directing and managing, which was a weird role for me. But yeah, I was really excited about that. And the last one was sound.
Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, yeah. She did an amazing job with like coordinating all of the sound effects and also like she had to work with me because I was hooking up sound effect triggers. And so she was like pushing in stuff. I was adding it to the game. We were testing it back. And this led to the funniest bug that nearly went into the version that we shipped over, where when you knock down an enemy, they'd make it like an armor hitting the ground sound. And as I was playing it over and over again, I was finding it was getting really loud. I was like, "Oh, it's sounding loud." And because I'm the programmer, I'm just going to control the mix. I'm going to just reduce it down. I'm going to play it at half strength. Oh, it's still a bit loud. I'm going to play it at quarter strength, 0.1 strength. Like, I don't know why this sound effect is so loud. Like, what are they doing here? And eventually she comes across and goes, "Yeah, we noticed in the build, are you playing the sound effect over and over again every time the enemy like lands on the ground?" And it turned out I was registering a delegate for in the code every time an enemy was spawned, but I was never unregistering the delegate. So over the course of the demo, where we're recycling enemies, the last enemies in the game were actually playing like 20, 30 knockdown animations at once, like sound effects at once. And when she pointed this out, it's like, oh, that's why it sounds like someone's just getting punched through a kitchen. It's like like every sound effect and every variant playing at once. So we fixed that. But yeah, no, she did a great job. All the effects and the.
All right. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for coming on and talking to me about your lives and your time at Sega and Witchbeam and Tim, really looking forward to unpacking, and Nat, I'm really looking forward to your Lemmings / Choo Choo Rocket Fusion. And I'd love to talk to you guys again sometime. And thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.